to Transportation Demand Modeling. Let me turn my camera on. I'm your guide, Thomas Hill, State Modeling Manager with the Systems Forecasting and Trends Office in the Florida Department of Transportation. Actually, do I have control? Or am I just going to tell you to move forward?
Yep, there you go.
Here we go. That was me. And so we have saved time at the end of the presentation for questions. You are muted during the duration of this panel, but this presentation, but we do encourage you to use the chat box for your questions and or comments. The webinar is being recorded, and we will post this later on the Florida Transportation Resource Hub, a link to that to come later. I'm not sure to get this thing going. Is there a lag on our slides, Sarah?
Possibly. I'm to the professional development credits.
There we go. Got it. So credits are offered for planners and engineers that attend the live session. Participants must attend the entire session to be eligible for the 1.5 hours of credit. If you're with FDOT, you can download a certificate through the Learning Curve, and then all other participants will receive certificates via email. So quick overview of our model uses. The purpose of today's discussion is to provide you with a fundamental understanding of the values of transportation models. We'll be touching base on both demand models and microsimulation models to illustrate how models are applied to solve local transportation issues and demystify some of the complexity of modeling. What this discussion will not do is delve into how a model is developed or discuss anything remotely related to the internal mechanisms of modeling. Maybe we do that later in another seminar webinar, but it's not our intent today. So transportation models are powerful tools that help us understand complex systems by simulating behavior in individual units such as automobiles, freight buses, people. And the primary benefit here is the forecast of future travel conditions and scenario testings. So whether you're a modeler, a planner, an engineer, an appointed elected official, there are a lot of reasons why a model provides value to the work that you do. So models can be complicated, but they don't necessarily have to be mysterious. So today's webinar will walk through a few examples of how model outputs were used in a variety of settings. And specifically today, we'll be talking about traffic impact analyses, tolling, project development, and economic impacts. But outside of these examples, there are a lot of uses for model outputs, with LRTPs, long-range transportation plans, being the most common use. But also project scenario planning, interchange justification reports, modification reports through the NEPA process, freight truck studies, transit planning, comprehensive plan analysis. That's actually where I got my start in kind of this field, was analyzing comprehensive plan changes. Development impacts as well. But even broader than that, our models can provide key insights into safety planning studies, using crash data modifications, intelligent transportation systems, air quality analysis, and congestion management. And then there are specialty models and uses such as the Florida hurricane evacuation models. We have a standalone model that estimates the time of evacuation or clearance time that people would need, or we would need, in order to clear a population given the size of a hurricane approaching an area of Florida. Our models also house a lot of standalone socioeconomic data, such as population, employment, school. And all this stuff sits alone and can be looked along, gives you really good information about your area that you don't really have to kind of manipulate through the model. There's also short-term origin destination patterns. So our models are really the only tool available that allows a comprehensive analysis of interactions between roadways, population, and land use characteristics. And all this is built around an established, localized understanding of travel behaviors, such as how far people travel, what purpose, going to work, you're going shopping, I'm going social recreation. And in some models, when people are out there, kind of more of a diurnal analysis. There's freight considerations and also multimodal considerations in our model. So all this information undergoes a careful vetting process using estimation, calibration, validation, reasonable checks. But it's data that's generated at trusted sources, either federal or local sources, and then vetted through local experts and the public. So the end product here is the availability of highly useful tool for data-driven decision making. Move on to the next slide. I don't know why we're. So all of our information is contained here on the Florida Transportation Resource Hub. We have a new website. This is taking place. If you're familiar with the old FSU TMS online, we are replacing that with more of a forecasting kind of approach. Travel demand models being one of them, but on this website is all of our travel demand models in the state of Florida, our guidance on how to operate and use those models, some of our resources, specifically our research, and training, specific training. We have online training, with in-person training, all that's located here. So if you look up in the far right corner here, there is a way to log onto this and get notifications from us about travel demand modeling in Florida. So if we will move on to our panelist, let me give a quick introduction here. If we get to the right page. Thank you. So today's panelists, to discuss model applications, we have an exciting panel with us to share their experiences and answer questions. Winston Harris and Zara Pourabdali will walk us through the Port Everglades bypass road that has recently started construction. Winston serves as a senior traffic group leader for RS&H's transportation infrastructure practice. His 39 years of experience in traffic engineering, transportation planning, and his experience includes project traffic forecasting, traffic operations, road safety, traffic impact studies, traffic and signal systems, access management, traffic calming, and traffic data collection and analysis. He's an engineer of record and author of numerous intersection access request documents, and has worked alongside DOT staff conducting statewide workshops on the FDOT's travel demand forecasting procedures. Zara has served as the senior transportation planner for RS&H. She has 14 years of experience in travel demand modeling, discrete choice analysis, transportation planning, freight planning, and logistics modeling. She leads the travel demand modeling efforts for RS&H in support of various planning. Sarah, it looks like our slides have not advanced. Okay, there we go. There we go. Maybe a little bit of a lag there.
Oh, I thought you were, I'm sorry. I thought you were introducing all of them.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I am. Real quickly. And then moving on to our next set of presentations, Carleen Flynn and Jimmy Molandi will share a few experiences using model data in the Orlando area, including the State Road 414 Expressway extension, the State Road 417 Sanford Airport connection, and an economic impact analysis of Central Florida Expressway's 5-year work program. So Carleen is a transportation planner and principal with CDM Smith with over 30 years of experience in local, regional, and statewide transportation planning with various public and private sector employees. Throughout her career, she's studied and evaluated toll facility and managed lane projects, capital transit projects, toll rate policies for board action and administrative law procedures, public involvement in local government land use planning. Actually, Carleen and I go back maybe 28 of those 30 years, starting our careers both on Marion County. So good to see an old friend here. Jimmy is a senior traffic engineer and project manager with 20 years of experience in transportation engineering. He's worked extensively with the Central Florida Expressway Authority and the Florida's Turnpike Enterprise. His areas of expertise include project development, traffic forecasting and operations, safety analysis for freeways, arterials, and intersections. Again, just to remind you, we've saved some time at the end of the presentation for questions. We do encourage you to use the chat box for your questions and comments. And with that, I'm going to hand over our webinar to Winston and Sarah.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes. Yeah, all good.
Okay. All right. The project I'll be talking about our Port Everglades Bypass Road project. This slide shows the project location for those who may not be familiar. So Port Everglades that's located in the southeast region of Florida. It's in close proximity to the Fort Lauderdale Airport, as you can see. And some of the major transportation facilities connected to the site are in the vicinity. I-95, I-595, US 1, State Road 84, and State Road A1A. Next slide, please. Okay, taking a closer look now at the actual project site. Shown here, you can see Port Everglades, the Broward County Convention Center, and the roads immediately adjacent to the project. The proposed bypass road is shown there in that teal light blue color, and we'll be talking about that as we move forward. First, there's a few facts about Port Everglades. Port Everglades is, one of Florida's most diverse ports. It supports both cruise ships, international trade, containers, cargo, and perhaps most importantly, it is one of the seaports receiving for petroleum products, highest yielding petroleum products for South Florida. It's really the economic engine in Broward County. Okay, the need for the project. The project need really stems from the expansion of the Broward County Convention Center. This expansion was approved by the Broward County Commissioners back in 2015, and it incorporates several proposed improvements. It includes construction of a 800-room headquarter hotel, an additional 560,000 square feet of convention center, a new parking area for terminals 2 and 4, about 1,800 parking spaces, and some additional waterfront amenities. Of course, with this expansion, they're expecting an increase in trade, increase in business, and of course, generating lots more traffic within the port area. Hence the primary reason for this project. And the project will also have some additional benefits in terms of providing relief, congestion relief to the adjacent roadways. The next slide that we're going to get to, it's a simulation that was prepared and animation to showcase the proposed bypass roadway. This was used both for technical and marketing purposes, and really selling the product to the Broward County Commission and to the public at large. See if you can just hit start button. This is a short 2-minute video.
Begins just east of the intersection of US 1 and State Road 84. Roadway users traveling eastbound will be able to access Port Everglades through a new security checkpoint, or alternatively access the Port Bypass Road connecting directly to Southeast 17th Street and the Convention Center. The Port Bypass Road Bridge will span over an at-grade roundabout that provides full access to all the fuel farms and all other port tenants. The project improvements have been designed with consideration of the cargo and tanker truck traffic volumes that use all of the port's roadways. The Port Bypass Road, located within the port's secured right-of-way and separated by barrier and fence, provides a direct connection to the Convention Center and Port Everglades Terminals 2 and 4. This roadway eliminates the need for motorists to pass through the port security checkpoints. A service road that connects to the roundabout will be constructed to the north and west of the proposed Port Bypass Road and will provide access to the northern port tenants and fuel farms. The bypass roadway turns north as it approaches Eisenhower Boulevard. Minor roadway modifications along Eisenhower Boulevard will allow for the existing security checkpoint to remain at its current location. The bypass roadway ends at the intersection of Eisenhower Boulevard and Southeast 20th Street.
And thank you. Yeah, the video was a little bit jerky
Bypass
there.
Road project.
Oh, can you go to the next slide? Yeah. The video there was a little bit jerky. Hopefully, you could at least see the flow. A longer version, that was a 2-minute video, a longer version showing the full project, can easily be seen on YouTube if you should log on. But just to go back through some of those key features of the project, it will construct this new 2-lane facility that will separate traffic going, general use traffic versus traffic going to the port. Traffic going to the port will still go through a secure gated access. You can see one of the gated accesses there. And a service road will be provided for accessing those fuel farms to the north of the proposed bypass roadway. Some capacity improvements are also planned at the main primary intersections connecting to the port, and I'll show you those in a little while. That's to improve connectivity and access to the port also as part of the project. The overall project estimated cost approximately $55 million for construction. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. This just shows the slide shows the existing conditions at the port. You can see the existing roadway facility through the center there with the fuel farms to the north and to the south. Next slide, please. The slide shows the alignment of the proposed new bypass road. You see it's aligned just to the north of the existing road facility. Next slide, please. Okay, and this slide shows the 2 access points, primary access points to the port. You can see the bypass road there in blue, which provides general use access. And you can also see the gated access points. So for those restricted areas of the port, they will still have that gated access, security access. Next slide, please. The bypass road terminates at the convention center, which you see in the top right-hand corner there, with multiple movements being provided. Next slide sort of illustrates that. Yeah, multiple movements occurring, busy slide, multiple movements occurring at this location, and we are providing for all movements accessing to and from the convention center from the various roadways that converge at this point. Next slide, please. All right, and this slide just shows the 2 primary intersections providing access to the port. The plan also calls for providing improvements at these 2 intersections. These improvements will primarily be adding turn lanes and signal and improving signal operations to improve capacity. Okay, so that was a quick overview on the traffic side. Zara is now going to talk about how traffic light modeling was used in the process.
Thank you, Winston. And thank you, Thomas, for the introduction. So like in the next few slides, basically, I'm going to talk about why we needed the model and how it was useful for our traffic team, Winston and his team in their micro simulation modeling and their in-depth analysis on the traffic. So basically, can you further ahead? So basically the model, we had like several uses in mind, and we had several questions to be used for that model could be useful and we needed the model for. The first and most important question was how to evaluate the proposed infrastructure. So there is this new infrastructure that we would like to understand the impacts of it on the local network and future traffic diversion. And then next was to provide some support and inputs for further and detailed traffic analysis. And eventually, the model was the basis to provide some support for grant application for the local government. Next slide, please. So the first question, evaluation of the impacts of the new infrastructure has multi-layers. The first one was the land use development and site impact analysis of the convention center expansion. The model can be very useful in giving us an estimate and a prediction of how many new trips will be generated from this land use development, and how they will use the local network, how this trip will be distributed on the local network. As you can see in the model plots, these are like direct plots from the model. On the left, you see model outputs, the traffic distribution, and the trips generated from existing convention center. And on the right, you see you can compare and see the additional 5,600 trips that will be generated with the expansion and how they will be distributed on the local network. Next slide, please. The second question that we were looking for was when you, if the new facility is built, how many trips it will be at, it will get diverted, they get diverted from the local networks. How many cars and how many trucks will use the new facility to get to their existing origin and destinations? So it was like to establish a footprint on a very high level, on a course level of the traffic forecast. And as you can see in the plot, we can Can we go to the previous slide, please? Okay. So as you can see in the plot, this is the before and after adding this the facility into the network. In overall, more than 12,000 trips will be diverted from the local networks to the new facility, from which more than 1,000 will be truck that will be diverted from the local residential commercial land uses to this industrial type land use. Next slide, please. And here is like side-by-side comparison of the model traffic forecast for before and after you add the facility in. On the left side, you see the existing traffic on, especially on the US 1 and Southeast 17th Street, which are the two busiest streets that have has an intersection on the northwest side of the port, and the traffic distribution on them. And on the right side, you can visibly see the reduction in traffic on both facilities and the amount of trip that will be attracted to the new facility. Next slide, please. So after establishing that footprint and analyzing the potential traffic diversion, we also use the model to look at the operational side of things and look at the congestion relief and what would be the changes in externalities for all the road users within that local network. One of the things that we looked at and the model helped us provide the output for it to be analyzed is the level of service based on the volume over capacity ratio. On the left, you can see the volume over capacity ratio based on different level of services, and the right shows the network, the model output for after the facility is built, for the build scenario, where you can visibly see some congestion relief and improvement in the volume over capacity for all the local network in the study area. Next slide, please. Another measure that we looked at and we analyzed was the speed. We looked at the peak period speed for both AM peak and PM peak for before and after no build and build alternative. And there was maybe a couple of miles per hour like improvement in the speed that would not tell you much, but when you look at the travel time and reduction in travel time, and you consider it for all the users of the network within that facility in terms of vehicle hour traveled, the saving in time was huge for the entire users of that local network. For the no build, you can see the VHT for those two facilities, US 1 and Southeast 17th Street, and you can compare it to the build scenario. And in total for the Southeast 17th Street, 315 hours will be saved on daily basis for the road users, and on US 1 is 193 hours. Next slide, please. And in summary, so the model showed to be very useful to answer several questions and like put the foundation for the grant application. It attracts more than 12,000 daily vehicles from other paths, including more than 1,000 truck trips from residential commercial routes to new facility, which has an industrial land use type. This also has safety implication improvement for the local network. Visibly, we could see improvements in level of service, peak hour speed, and also time savings for the entire road users in the study area. And next slide, please. And here is a reiteration of all the applications, different applications that the model was used in this project, from the land use development with the expansion of the convention center to site impact analysis of the distribution of those new trips, to forecasting the traffic for the future infrastructure and assessing the impacts of this new structure, and providing some foundation for further traffic analysis, macro simulation analysis, and supporting decision makers with the grant application and other planning decisions. Next slide, please. And this project actually was granted the grant, and it was basically the construction began like a couple of weeks ago, and it's planned to move ahead and be finished in the fourth quarter of the next year. So it's the study provided that foundation, the model provided that foundation for moving ahead with this project. Next slide.
Right. That concludes our presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation there. We'll move on to some projects we've got over in Central Florida, but I think I love that your presentation is a great example of how to use the model to kind of promote the development of a new roadway that's going to increase economic development and increase mobility in an area that was already highly congested. So thank you for that. And there are a few questions that have been posted on that we'll get to after Carlene's and Jimmy's presentation. So Carlene, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Can we go to the next slide, please? We have a little bit of an agenda because Jimmy and I are sharing the presentation. First, give a little bit of a background on CFX for those of you who are unaware or do not know a lot about the agency. And we're going to talk about two different projects and how we use the model to answer some questions on those particular projects, and then how we supported an economic impact analysis of their 5-year work program. So next slide. Central Florida Expressway Authority owns and operates 125 miles of tolled expressways in Central Florida, 8 facilities and 19 toll plazas. It's a lot of toll plazas. Those are shown in black, those little black lines. So their jurisdictions, 5 counties: Orange, Osceola, Seminole, Lake, and Brevard. So on the map, you'll notice the CFX facilities are in purple. The Florida's Turnpike Enterprise facilities are shown in green. DOT's portion of the Wekiva Parkway is shown in blue in the top portion of the map. And other facilities, other toll roads, there's a lot of toll roads here in Central Florida, are shown in brown, but are operated by CFX. They process about 1.6 million transactions a day, with 85% of those being completed using transponders such as ePass, SunPass, and other interoperable transponders. They have a 5-year work plan that was just adopted that's over $4 billion. So they have a lot of things going on in Central Florida. Next. So as their traffic engineer, we have several tasks that we're responsible for, but in the center there is we're responsible for developing and maintaining the CFX travel demand model. And this is a specific model. You know, we start with the MPO or the district model, the CFRPM, Central Florida Regional Planning Model, and we use both. We incorporate toll components, and we also calibrate and validate that model, CFX's version of the model, to their system facilities for use in their projects. Next. So the Central Florida Planning Model, which is conveniently it captures all of the counties that CFX has jurisdiction over for toll roads. We maintain 2 versions of the model, the former 6.1. We like to call it CFX 3.0, but we use that one for kind of the legacy projects, but as well as system forecasts. Using the newer version of the model 7.0, we've started taking a look at some of the newer projects, the one that Jimmy's going to be talking about, as well as we are trying to validate that to the system facilities. We do follow FDOT's Project Traffic Forecasting Handbook and other DOT guidelines when looking at projects, and we use it for a variety of applications, from planning level analysis, like year of need and capacity, and developing their work program, and any widening and existing system improvements, alignment screening, which Jimmy's going to discuss later on, as well as revenue forecasting, as each trip is very important to CFX because it equates to revenue. So that's an important part of what we do. So we're going to talk about the 414 Expressway extension and how we supported the PD&E consultant on that particular project. Next slide. The 414 Expressway extension is an expansion project that's been identified in both the 2040 master plan, CFX's master plan, which was adopted in 2016. It's in their 5-year work plan. It first showed up in 2019. It's in Metro Plan's long range plan, as well as their TIP, again starting in 2019. But interestingly enough, there were 2 projects that were in the long range plan for this particular portion of 414. One was a widening project, a 6-lane widening project, and the second was this expressway extension. So they were both in there, and that's important when we think about the no build option for this project. So zooming in on the next slide. There you go. Thanks. It's a limited access connection between 2 limited access facilities. So if anybody's familiar with Northwest Orange County, we have the 414 Expressway, which starts kind of in the middle of that map and heads west from 441 and comes back around on the north side of Apopka back to 441. It's known as the John Land Apopka Expressway, thanks to Mayor Land, whose idea this was, but it provides kind of a bypass for 441. Unfortunately, there's a little section of arterial of Maitland Boulevard in between 441 and 434, or I-4 to the east. There's 3 signalized intersections in there, and it's quite the bottleneck during the peak hours when you got expressway traffic coming back down to arterial speed, hitting a bunch of signals, and then trying to beat their way over to I-4. So that was the project highlighted in yellow that we were considering. Next slide. So as part of the traffic analysis, we wanted to understand better what the travel patterns were and who and how the road was being used today. So one tool in the travel demand model is a select link analysis. And it looks at if you provide an origin, which they're in the red box, any of the traffic going through that origin, it'll show you where they're heading to from there. So we wanted to use that, and then we cross-referenced it with big data, Wejo data. I'm not sure that they're still in business, but it's a lot like streetlight data, but a different data set. And so we looked at that, and given the origin, about 20% of the traffic going through there kind of jumped off at 441, but the remainder 80% went through. So our area of that we were considering is kind of the yellow box there, and 20% of the traffic was headed to that area, the cross streets and 434. So that local residential traffic. 30% was headed to the Maitland Center Office Park, where my office is. So very familiar with this corridor. And then the rest of it was heading out towards I-4 and Maitland, which is east of I-4. So about, if you take out the 20% that's going to 441, about 70% of the traffic is through the arterial section. So that was really important in the analysis, and the model helped us figure that out. So next slide. Before the PD&E study, a feasibility of the improvement project was developed. We have 118 feet of right of way through here. A lot of it's already being used up by the existing arterial. How do we get more capacity in this area for that through traffic? So they developed this reversible express lane schematic. The GEC, just they wanted to prove that you could build an elevated expressway through here. This was the original idea, which was two reversible lanes to handle the peak hour traffic. But soon, next slide, we realized that wasn't enough. While it handled the traffic in the peak direction, it didn't handle it in the off-peak direction. So before too much work actually happened on the project, before a lot of effort was spent looking at the different alternatives, we used the travel demand model and some very simple volume to capacity ratios to look at 5 different alternatives, including the existing and the no build. And you'll notice in the no build, we had to consider an improvement for the no build, which is unusual, but that was the 6-lane arterial section that was already in the long range plan. So we used the model volume, and I took out a lot of the gory detail, and I thought red and green would be an easy way of showing this. But we looked at, from a daily perspective, the peak direction and the off-peak direction. So we looked at 1 lane in each direction upstairs. We like to say upstairs, downstairs. 2 lanes in each direction upstairs. 2 lanes reversible. A convertible 3-lane section with 2 in the peak direction, 1 in the off-peak direction. And then also the 6-lane arterial with 1 lane in each direction upstairs. And just looking at each of these, you could see, where they met off-peak direction, but maybe not peak direction, or peak direction and not off-peak, or daily. And the one that met it in all of those different scenarios was concept 4, which is 2 lanes in each direction. It's quite a structure. And we'll move on to that slide. So this is the typical section that we landed upon. It's the elevated 4-lane section. So 4 express lanes up top, and then the 4 general use on the bottom. And this allowed for additional bike lanes to be added downstairs to take all that through traffic off of the arterial downstairs and make it a little bit more pedestrian friendly on the bottom. But so this project is currently in design, but this allowed, once they settled upon this alternative, it allowed I think they got this PD&E study done in 15 months. It allowed them to move forward with, how do we tie in this elevated structure on either end? What do those ramp configurations look like? What's the operational analysis downstairs? So it was a good use of the travel demand model and some very simple volume to capacity ratio to help them develop that typical section. So next thing I wanted to talk about was the economic impact analysis of CFX's 5-year work program. I'd say every 5 years, CFX hires the Cutter, the Center for Urban Transportation Research, to complete an economic impact analysis. And this time it was for their $4 billion work program. We just support their efforts. We use the travel demand model to provide them some inputs into their economic impact modeling. So we did that using the model. We did a with and without the 5-year work plan, plus some additional projects maybe that were started in the 5-year work plan, but we're finished in the 10-year, in the next 5 years. And we looked at vehicle miles traveled, vehicle hours traveled, and average speed improvement. Next slide. So we got a lot of numbers on here, but this just shows, the output that we provided to Cutter. So we tested 3 model years, 25, 35, and 45. And then we brought those projects into the model when they were expected to open for that model year. We sorted it by facility type. So the toll facilities are down at the bottom. We don't have any HOV facilities, but these are facility types that are identified in the model for each of the roadway segments in the network. The model provides an output of vehicle miles traveled, so you can request that from your modelers. They should be able to provide that to you. And what we were looking for was once you put the toll facilities on, there's going to be a decrease in the vehicle miles traveled and hours traveled on the local network and more on the tolled facilities with the improvements, widenings, expansion projects such as the 414 and a lot of travel time savings. So at the bottom, in the bottom there, bottom row where it says total, you can see in 2025, the 5-year work program improvements provided about 35,000 hours of travel time savings. And in 45, that increases to 133,000 vehicle hours traveled. So a lot of travel time savings with the work plan. And again, another fairly simple analysis to provide some inputs to what's not really considered a transportation project, but an economic analysis. With that, I'm gonna turn it, I got one more slide, sorry. So I am not a modeler. I've done modeling, but I say I speak model. But for folks out there are a lot of model outputs that you can use for planning purposes, like for the when I just showed the vehicle miles traveled, vehicle hours traveled, speeds, total trips, trip patterns, like I said, the select link, the little graphic at the top there with the orange and green, that's an example of a select link analysis and what your output would be from that. And then you have screen lines or cut lines and average distance traveled. These are all things you can get out. They're mostly used for calibrating and validating models for existing conditions, but they can be used for projects when you want to show your managers or your politicians, you know, what is the impact of that project with and without, you know, what's the impact on the network? What's the impact on trips? What's the diversion? And you know, these are a lot of good outputs that you can use for public involvement or public decision making. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jimmy, who's going to talk about 417 Sanford Airport Connector.
Yes, thanks, Colleen. Yeah, and now we're going to, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're going to talk about application of the Central Florida Regional Planning Model in screening alignments for the proposed connector from STERT 417 to Sanford Airport. The figure on the left here shows the general location of the project for those who are not familiar with the Orlando metro area. Orlando downtown is kind of at the bottom left corner there, at the intersection of I-4 and STERT 408. And the project, or the Orlando Sanford International Airport, is located northeast of Orlando downtown in Seminole County, excuse me, off of STERT 417. The main access to the airport is along Lake Mary Boulevard via Red Cleveland Road, or Boulevard rather, sorry. But there's also, that's the main access to the passenger terminal, but there's also another access via Airport Boulevard to the north. That mainly serves cargo and delivery services, but also some passenger trips use that access. So the figure on the right shows the study area. And on here, we are showing a potential connection for the proposed connector. The study is still ongoing, as I'll mention in a later slide. And so here we're just showing a potential alignment for illustration purposes. Again, the intent is to provide a direct connection from STERT 417 to the airport, connecting somewhere along Lake Mary, going the Lake Mary being the east-west arterial. So Central Florida Expressway Authority, or CFX, is conducting this study, but there are also a few stakeholders who are also involved in this, like the county, the city, and the airport. Next slide, please. Purpose and needs. So currently, the interchange, like I said, the main access to the airport is through the 417 Lake Mary Boulevard interchange. Currently, that interchange is congested, as you can see in those figures at the top from Google Maps. There is extensive congestion along the arterials and also at the off ramps, especially the northbound off ramp. And so with that, there are several developments that are planned in the area. There's growing population, and also the airport is expecting additional employment in the future. And with that comes traffic growth. The traffic is expected to grow in the area. So the purpose for the this connector, again, is to improve the access to the airport, enhance traffic safety and operations, but most importantly, provide better or enhance local and regional connectivity. This connector will not just be serving the airport traffic, but will also, most of the traffic actually expected to use that connector is expected to be local and regional trips heading east and northeast of the airport. So with regard to status of the project, the a feasibility study was completed last year. That's what CFX calls a concept feasibility and mobility study. And a PD&E study was initiated last month in May. So this figure here shows the alignments that were evaluated in the CF&M study. Again, that's the concept feasibility and mobility study. And for modeling purposes, we kind of grouped them and came up with different combinations and permutations in order to test and come up with and answer some of the questions that we needed to provide. So essentially, we in the regional model, we modeled two alignments, A being the green one, representing the 4 alignments there that tie or terminate at the Lake Mary Boulevard and Red Cleveland Boulevard intersection. And the other alignment that we tested was the pink one, B. And with that, we tested different configurations for the interchanges. The one at 417, the full interchange and partial interchange, and also the Lake Mary Boulevard interchange. Again, looking at a full and partial or no interchange. And I also want to mention that as part of the PD&E, these alignments will be evaluated again, but also in addition to that, there will be a viaduct option that will be studied that will run along Lake Mary Boulevard, elevated concept that was requested by an environmental stewardship committee. Next slide, please. So as Colin mentioned, we primarily use the Central Florida Regional Planning Model, but in this case, we use the latest version, version 7. The figure here shows just the a project-specific study area that we developed. In other words, the sub area. The base year was 2021, and of course, we went through the full validation process and looking at different statistics and also using streetlights to validate ODs and patterns using comparing select link analysis in the model. And for future years, the future model years were 2030 and 2045. Different elements were updated, highway network, socioeconomic data, and the rest. And then for analysis, the future years were 2030 and 2050. The 2050 model, our volumes were extrapolated since the horizon year for the CFRPM is 2045. Next slide, please. So this slide here provides a general summary, a high-level general summary of the screening effort. Like I mentioned, there were 6 scenarios that we tested. Those were from the different combinations of the A and B alignment. So there was the A series, A1 to A4, as noted at the bottom there in the bullet. And then there was the B series, B1 and B2. So the table at the top shows the 2050 estimated AADTs. And here we are just showing, just for illustration purposes, high level, we're just showing the volumes of the Ramsden from the north at the proposed 417 interchange and Ramsden from the south. The numbers here would essentially represent the demand for the connector because there is no intermediate access between 417 and Lake Mary Boulevard. So really, the key takeaways from this summary is that number one, the expected demand for the demand for the Ramsden from the north is expected to be low. And that would only be in the first scenario, the A1, with a full interchange at both locations along at 417 and Lake Mary Boulevard. The other key takeaway is that if you only provide a connector to the airport, only to serve the airport traffic, the demand drops significantly. That's in the A2 alternative. That alternative directly serves the airport from 417 to the airport. And as you can see, the traffic projected traffic for the ramp train from the south drops from 24,800 in A1 to 6,100 in A2. And that goes in line with what I mentioned earlier on, that most of the traffic expected to use this connector would not necessarily be going to the airport, but would actually be local commuter trips going east and northeast of the airport. The third key takeaway was when you look at the B series alternatives, the traffic is for the ramp train from the south is lower compared to the traffic train from the south in the alternatives A1 and A3, and that's because that alignment is longer and it doesn't directly connect to the airport. And so, using the model, regional model, we were able to study this proposed connector and interchange, and there were several other details. We also looked at impacts along the existing facilities like 417 and the arterials. So most of the traffic at the connector would be diverted from existing facilities, 417, Lake Mary Boulevard, Airport Boulevard. So we were able to study that and by using the model and able to advise the stakeholders and the team on what is expected of the connector. And based on the data, the initial conclusion from the CFNM study was that a partial interchange with ramp train from the south should be considered going forward, which is alternative A3, and a full interchange at Lake Mary Boulevard. And like I mentioned, this project has now been advanced to a PD&E study. And again, we're going to be updating the regional model and refining it further and studying this again, the alignments again, and also that additional alignment that I just mentioned. And with that, I think that concludes our presentation.
Right on time, Jimmy. Good job, man. We're right on with the flow. So that was perfect. It must have modeled that somehow. So we did have a couple of questions in the chat box, and maybe we can get to those really quickly. And maybe go on starting back with Winston and Zara real quick. There were multiple questions on what software was used for the modeling. I think maybe there was some discussion a little bit around the SERPA model and where that was at, and then also maybe the microsimulation.
Yeah, I can start with the SERPA model. I'll put also in the chat the response. The SERPA model, but the previous version of the SERPA model, not the current version, was used for the regional and the high-level analysis of the forecast. But I believe Winston have used some microsimulation modeling as well. And SERPAM is an activity-based model, ABM coded in Cube software, which is a general transportation planning package software.
Right, and operation side, VISM was used for the microsimulation, the traffic microsimulation. So that was used to illustrate how the operations would what to expect when it opens. But it's also used for producing that video that you see there. So that video started out with the VISM microsimulation model, handed that over to our visualization team, and they used their techniques to enhance it, add in all the background features that you see in that video.
Thank you. And then there were a couple of questions, but one of them was around bike lanes and AV shuttle lanes being planned. Were bike lanes and AV shuttle lanes considered in your project?
Yeah, but this particular project, no, we didn't consider bike lanes, AV shuttles, and I'm not aware of any being planned at this time within the port. But I do know that the port is looking at a connector between Port Everglades and Fort Lauderdale International Airport. That project is in the planning stages. So that's one people mover connector that's being looked at.
Yeah, a lot of heavy traffic moving through that area too, and a lot of converging and conflicting traffic. So maybe it wasn't the right area for it, but good question anyway. And then, so Carlene, Jimmy, there's another sticking with the kind of the bike lanes question. What were the expected traffic speeds next to these bike lanes? And this one came up on the SR 414.
Yeah, I actually saw this and I went in and I looked at the preliminary design report. So currently the posted speed limit is 50 miles an hour through the arterial. I think it's just to get stuff through there. It's a get traffic through there. It is a controlled access, so there's no driveways at all through this section of the corridor. It's only cross streets. So it's not really the most pedestrian friendly section of roadway, but the typical section had it going down to 45 miles per hour. And it gets, you know, with the elevated section, it gets rid of kind of the high speed through traffic. Those people are trying to get through that area. But and the project currently is in design. I'm not part of the design team, but I do recall there was some coordination with Seminole County, and Seminole County has, you know, a lot of bike trails, and they wanted to make that connection. So I think there was some discussions about a multi-use path through there instead of the bike lanes, or maybe not like a unstriped bike lane, or what's that? Where you don't have you have this width, but you don't have the symbol there. So a wide shoulder. Plus a wider sidewalk or multi-use path. So, you know, there's some of that, but it really was to take that kind of through high-speed traffic off of the corridor. So that allowed for the more pedestrian bike facilities to be implemented.
And then there was another question to the SR 414 about cost comparisons or analyses versus, you know, rail and elevated versus elevated infrastructure.
Cost compare rail. Well, there was not a rail component as part of this PD&E study. They didn't get into that level of alternative analysis. Just whether they did look at, again, the 6-lane. Does that meet the need? No, that didn't meet the need. And then the elevated. So they were able to fit this whole project in. They're going to be 8 laning this section within the existing right-of-way. So no additional right-of-way was needed. I mean, maybe some corner clips here and there, but no significant right-of-way was needed for that.
And what I thought was a really good question on the MOEs. Yeah, how accurate are the MOEs as they're calculated, like VNT, TTS speeds? I mean, they give you an idea of what's going on, but
yeah, you always have to think about, and this was something I was, you know, it goes back to when I did some modeling back in the day. Again, it's a tool, right? It's a tool in the toolbox, and it gets calibrated and validated based on the data. So good data in, good data out. And, you know, you have to, it's only as good as the data you put into it. So are you using it volume to volume? Are you using it growth just for growth rates? You have to kind of consider those things when you're looking at it, and you know, in some cases use professional judgment. But it, again, like Thomas, you were saying, it's more a tool and to give you some guidance.
right, and it's useful in its own right, as a comparison. You really, there are very few things that you want to take directly out of that model, saying this is what it's going to be.
Yeah, I'm just going to add something to that too. Yes, you know, as Yvonne mentioned, it depends on how well the model is coded and calibrated or validated. And so, I mean, there is additional judgment, as you all know, that has to be applied. Simply saying that the model says or shows this is not usually good enough. I think Ali knows that that's one of my pet peeves. So you got to look beyond that. Yes, it's not the model shows this or says this. There's a lot of judgment that goes into it, and validation, the key is to make sure that the model is realistic and representing a field conditions accurately. Otherwise, just taking any and not necessarily even the regional model, even operational analysis models, and simply running it and saying the results show this. That doesn't cut it really.
Yeah, and it kind of loops in with, it's that building trust, right? And there's one final question, I think it was in the chat, that, and maybe it was to everyone here, that maybe if you want to chime in on, on validation, how validation can help with the model, and then actually communicate how and build trust within the model. So what is that process, and does that process standard? I mean, it's from our perspective, right? We try to standardize that process across Florida, so we're all reading from the same kind of textbook or recipe book, if you will, so that there's consistency across the state, right? And gives us legal standing as well, and plus helps us train everybody to that same kind of perspective. But beyond that, the validation is what gives us trust in kind of our results and the VNTs and the VHTs. Right? I mean, there's that's why we do it. What I thought was a really good question on kind of big data and using that within the model. First, a really nice compliment to you guys. And then how was Wejo ODs compared with the model select link results, right? So comparing kind of that pro data with actual results in the model.
So that's why I have the little kind of equal sign, but comparative. We used Wejo data for the first time on this project because it was a little bit different data source, this connected vehicle data source, but it really only came from one particular car manufacturer. So, there's a little bias there, but we thought that comparing it to the streetlight data, it had a better capture rate, but it was very specific. Like, I mean, you could locate where a car was parked, so that was a little scary for us. We didn't want to know that level of detail. It was taking what came out of the model and then what came, again, these two tools, what came out of Wejo and sort of using some professional judgment to create that sort of OD pattern that we were looking at. And really it was to for informational purposes, trying to public involvement purposes, just showing people that this is the general use of the quarter on a daily basis.
So maybe on a more global scale, talking about kind of the way that we build our models and running our models, and that's a time-consuming effort, right? I mean, I think some of the time consumption maybe gets lost up with the complexity of the model. What suggestions can you provide for coordinating and communicating kind of these model refinements with the agencies that you're working for?
Sarah, did you want to start?
I can start on, I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I think like we do communicate, the local agencies are like stakeholders in like the refinement and validation process of the model. And I think the most important thing is like to establish communication channels. Sometimes like we have projects in areas that it's even difficult to find the right person to communicate with and like collaborate with or coordinate with regarding question. Having those point of contacts and then regular meetings would be very helpful to like have that channel constantly open and like communicate the needs. And another thing that is being actually used in some district is like a collaborative platform. I think would be very helpful, like a data sharing portal or like a workspace, a shared workspace that all the stakeholders based on the type of projects that could see the data, share information, answer questions. And some district, I know that they are practicing this, and it's an ongoing effort to put that in use, like a shared data portal, like an ArcGIS online platform to share with all the stakeholders, MPOs, local agencies for communication.
Jimmy, any thoughts to that?
Oh, Jimmy.
Oh, sorry, I was cutting you off, Carlene.
No, that's okay. I know Jimmy had a couple of points on this one.
No, it's just in line with what Zara mentioned. Yeah, starting early, agency coordination is key, and just asking and obtaining feedback on plan improvements and development in the area. That will help in fine-tuning and updating your model. Because, I mean, the more fine-tuned the model is, the more accurate your projections will be. These accurate, projections are the ones we're using for design purposes, to make some key decisions on what the lane requirements are. And if the forecasts are not accurate, then your design, you may end up either over designing or under designing. So it's very important to have a good understanding of the region and what the study area, to be able to correctly model that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess maybe communicating that is kind of an art form in its own right. Converting kind of a model speak into English is sometimes difficult. Thoughts to that, Winston?
Well, on the operations side, particularly when you over those simulation models, coordination with the various agencies is always key, and getting them to understand what are the limitations of your model. The modeling, it's just another tool to help you make a decision. It's an art as much as it is a science. And the bottom line is that engineering judgment always has to be applied in making that decision. We spend a lot of effort trying to calibrate models, but that calibration, I would argue, is only as good as the existing conditions. You are calibrating to existing conditions. We're typically designing 20 years out in the future. There are so many changes disrupting our transportation industry these days, from AVs even to COVID. So it's difficult, and you have to just think of it as a tool and make sure that your decision makers are aware that it's just a tool.
So I'm going to ask one more question here, and Carlene, I'll start with you, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. And I got maybe 2 slides here to talk about just wrapping things up. But channel demand models are by nature highly technical tools. And do you have any suggestions on how to plainly communicate the technical aspects of a model to planners and to decision makers and to the public?
I think what we've been saying all along, again, it's their tools, right? And just making sure that you understand the data that goes into it. I was going to follow up on the last one about the socioeconomic data, the SE data. We go through the SE data with a fine-tooth comb, just because what's on the ground today isn't always what's going to be on the ground tomorrow, and what is already approved by the local government. So again, that communication is really important. And going back to some of the legacy models, the design has, or the development plans, while overall the control total for the county is the same, the development happened in a much different pattern. So you need to, if you're going to look at a specific corridor, you need to make sure and coordinate with those local officials that are responsible for those developments. Just because they're like, oh, do you have this in there? Do you have this in there? Is that in there? Yes, it's in there. It's in your plan. Yes, we have it. It's part of it. But just I likened it to trying to explain what it is you do to your parents, right? Do they understand what you do? They think you are, what do you do on a daily basis? I don't know. It was very hard to explain it to my mother. So it's trying to dumb it down to trying to explain it to your parents, right? What the project is all about, and just on its very basic level, not get too technical. Stay out of acronyms. Just explain it as simple as you can.
Yeah, Zara, any thoughts to that? Actually, let me go to Winston on there. I think he looks like he's primed.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, of course, visuals are always good in trying to convey, at least from an operational and design perspective. And that video that we saw we produced for this Port Everglades project, they do take considerable effort and time to produce. But in the end, it's more of a marketing tool as sometimes than a technical tool. But it is very helpful in conveying, especially to the average public person out there, as to what this will look like, what operations will look like, where will those queues expand to, what will the delays look like. So visuals are always a good tool, and we're getting better and better at doing that, looking more like real life tools these days.
Zara, any
just to add the importance of engagement and education, like webinars like this that can reach to non-technical people, non-modelers, but they are somehow involved with the modeling and use the model output. That would be very helpful too. So balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Jimmy, you want to close this out?
Well, I think those are great points. Using plain language, visuals, graphics, but also speaking in terms of impact and benefits. Especially if you can display that graphically, speaking to especially to the locals, telling them your commute is gonna be reduced from 5 minutes to 2 minutes, something like that. That way they understand. Otherwise, just telling them that you're gonna have an X amount of traffic on this roadway, it doesn't say much to them, but they want to understand what is the benefit, what is the impact to my commute, to my day-to-day activities and things like that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all the input here. And gonna maybe Sarah, if you could just pull up the last couple of slides. And while we're doing that, just kind of maybe a digital appreciation here for all of our panelists who spent a lot of time, considerable effort putting this together for us, and kind of rounding this out so that we get the most out of it. I'm going to make a couple of shameless plugs and then we'll let everybody go. We do have some training coming up, modeling for planners and decision makers. It's a little bit higher level than what we've done here today. It's kind of more into about what the model does, what the travel demand model does, and where it fits in the process, and what some of the at a high level, what are the inputs that go along with decision making, or the model decision making through the model. And then the next slide, Sarah. And then one other. We're in the process of finalizing a microstimulation traffic analysis webinar. So this one is on September 11th. Again, we'll have links to it in our hub page. And this one is about microsimulation. How to really, we're starting out on bringing people in and how do you review a microsimulation model, but really setting the foundation for microsimulation. What goes into it? What are some of the terms that are on it? So it's a real high level kind of look at microsimulation and what it's doing, what goes into it, but also not really delving into the mechanics so much as just really kind of explaining it on from a high level, maybe a 101 level. So next slide might be it. All right, so all of you, our participants, thank you so much for showing up with us and your input. And we will be sending out a survey. So please, when you get it, just take like 2 minutes and give us a couple of thumbs up or some input on what you heard today. Thank you so much.